Thank you all for joining us today at the Transforming Libraries for Graduate Students webinar series. This is the first one, so thank you. TLGS is the only national conference on graduate librarianship, which will take place virtually March 16th and 17th of 2022. So if you guys want more information, please see the official conference repository. And Jenny, who is our chat moderator today, she just dropped that link in the chat, so you guys check that out when you get a chance. I'm Elaine Walker. I'm the Graduate Studies Librarian at Mississippi University for Women, and I will be your host today. Jenny, who is our chat moderator, she is the head of health sciences at Temple University Libraries. She's going to be moderating our chat, so if you guys have any questions, just feel free to drop them in the chat or send them directly to her. Today's presentation is Brainwork in the Research Lifecycle, Idea Development Activity with SCAMPER. Our presenter is Dr. Vandy Passetti Donaldson. She is currently the Director of Library and Instructional Design and an Assistant Professor of Humanities and Research at the United States Sports Academy. It's a special mission university in Daphne, Alabama. She earned her MLIS from the University of Southern Mississippi and her doctoral degree from Nova Southeastern University in instructional leadership with an emphasis in instructional technology and distance education. Her research focuses on analysis of knowledge domains, visual conceptions of knowledge, and systems thinking. So without further ado, Vandy, take it away.
Good morning, everyone. I'm going to share my screen. And let's make sure I do this correctly. There we go. All right. I'm going to adjust the view on the side. Okay, so let's try that one more time. There we go. No? All right, well, leave it open. Okay, so today I would like to talk about an issue that is common among first-generation thesis and doctoral students. Recognizing that true research is a metacognitive activity that produces a writing product. So too often, students come to the library expecting to find what to think, not realizing that we as information scientists can help students learn how to think about what they find in resources during the research process. So today we're going to talk about metacognition and its role in the research process, and how our conceptual models of the research process and cycle may not accurately depict the role of metacognition in that process and cycle. Further, we will talk about developing and employing support to encourage metacognition during the research process. This began for me as a retention problem. How are the research needs of students who have stagnated in their programs, in their research process, being met? Who are our ABD, all but dissertation, and our ABT, all but thesis students? How are we helping them progress through to the completion of their research projects? We tried to look at the following questions. What is the reason that we have so many ABD or ABT students in a particular program? Do some programs have more than others? Are we looking at the commonalities? How have we evaluated these students and the common themes in their educational process? We recognized that some programs and instructors are more effective at teaching metacognition and the processes of creative thinking than others. So that became our focus. How do we support metacognition in the research process? Metacognitive processes can be applied to learning and thinking in all disciplines and contexts. It is an essential skill for lifelong learning, and therefore metacognitive skills need to be taught and discussed with students. This is especially true during the research process. Metacognition, simply defined, is intentional thinking about how you think and learn. It involves self-monitoring and self-regulating your own thinking and learning processes. For example, you are engaging in metacognition if you notice that you are having more trouble learning concept A than concept B, or if you realize that your approach to solving a problem is not working and then you decide to take a different approach. Metacognition also involves understanding your strengths. If you can explain what your strengths are in academic writing or exam taking or other types of academic tasks, then you are metacognitively aware. So the question then becomes, are students aware that research requires metacognition for success? How are we helping students develop metacognitive awareness in the research process? Let's dig deeper. Too often we forget we have a variety of students from different backgrounds and information-seeking constructs, especially our first-generation students who have been consuming information from a position of scarcity. And what I mean is they seek out information just at the point of need or just past the point of need. Every new learning experience in a degree program requires higher levels of cognition from the first-gen student. The cognitive load they experience places them at a disadvantage during the research process, which results in retention and completion issues. When we make metacognition visible, we are providing a more equitable learning experience. So let's take a moment to consider the theoretical support for this idea. It begins with Pentrick in 2002. First-generation students often come to college with little metacognitive knowledge, strategies, or cognitive task-forming abilities. Because according to Rummelhart, we default to our existing assumptions about how to do things because we humans prefer the path of least resistance to the answer. If I asked you right now to spell a particularly difficult word, most people in the room would ask Siri to find a spelling of the word on their personal device, rather than taking the time to logically discern the spelling of the word from their experiences of spelling difficult words. So if we recognize that humans are hardwired to fit new information and new challenges into existing assumptions or schema, and for that first generation student, that schema does not yet exist, then we should be providing a support that helps that student generate the schema for future metacognitive activity. When I say schema, I mean the toolkit of thinking activities that lead to learning. Let me give you an example from the kitchen. When my children were young, one of the first things that they learn in the kitchen is how to clean up a mess. So someone spills milk on the floor. I immediately say, okay, let's get a paper towel. They get a paper towel. They absorb the liquid. Then I say, okay, let's get a fresh paper towel with a little bit of water so we can wipe the spot. Now let's dry it. So they have learned a schema for dealing with a spill. So if they're in the bathroom and they spill something on the counter in the bathroom, they revert to that schema of how to deal with a spill. They go get a paper towel, they wet it, they wipe up the mess, they absorb liquid, they clean the area, they let it dry. So they have developed a schema from that point forward dealing with all spills. So now that we've explored the background of the problem, let's look at existing conceptual models that demonstrate the research process and cycle and consider their limitations of defining research behavior for the first generation student. I'm going to pull out my soapbox right now and say something controversial. Words matter. Every word we use will be written down by a first generation student. Make sure you're using the right ones. We make research difficult for students when we mix what to do with how to do it. And what do I mean by that? Please take a look at these two conceptual models about research. A conceptual model is a representation of a system. It consists of concepts used to help people know, understand, and/or simulate an action. Here on the right, we have one of the most common diagrams or conceptual models demonstrating the research process. Or according to the model on the left, it is the research cycle. Indeed, a scan of research guides and websites of universities across the U.S. will provide some version of these two models for student assistance with research. But what does it mean? I see arrows in one specific direction, clockwise, which indicates time. Since the arrows only face one direction, it indicates a linear activity. These items may be considered steps or stages that are completed and not returned to. They both begin with identifying something. This is a cycle of behavior. It is not the research process. These are the steps that one must complete to deliver a writing product, but this does not explain how research is conducted or how ideas are formed. Here is another conceptual model of the research cycle where ideation is acknowledged, but research in ideation is not acknowledged. So you can see the cycle at the top begins with idea or concept. The cycle is still represented as a linear process, which implies states of completion. And that's one of the reasons why this research cycle is often repeated for our graduate students, because we want them to complete the cycle. It is important for us as the information scientists to demonstrate ideation and the actual research process with students. We must make clear demonstrations of the difference between the research cycle and the research process. Here in this model of the research process, we can see the demonstration of actions and thinking are interrelated, repetitive, and reoccurring. The research process is not linear. It's iterative, with recurrent states of being and thinking that lead to repetitive actions. The research process can occur and should occur at any stage in the research cycle. So a more accurate representation of research may be an acknowledgement of both the research process and the research cycle, and that when a student completes a dissertation or a thesis, they are completing the what and the how involved in research. So when we are at the planning and designing stage in the research cycle, we may need to conduct the research process to identify ideas that will affect our planning and design. We will need to locate resources. We will need to interpret and evaluate that information. We will need to decide if we found enough information, and then we will need to apply what we found to our planning and design. And of course, we will then need to cite our sources. And in that stage in the research cycle, we have completed a research process. So let me say that again. Research process can occur at any stage in the research cycle. And too often for this first generation student, that information is not communicated effectively. So it's at this point that I'd like to take a pause, as I see the chat has kind of filled up with some statements. And Jenny, if you want to take over for questions at this moment.
Sure. There are some comments. Wendy said that her favorite model of the research process is the bowl of spaghetti. It's the only realistic one I know, but bless people for trying to break it down regardless. But actually, Sergio had a specific question. So what exactly is the role of the research methods class, if not to carefully and explicitly explain, train, and discuss all of these?
You know, and I said it earlier in the presentation that we have to recognize that some programs and some instructors are better at explaining that than others. I'm currently at an institution where the majority of our student body is first gen. And we've had some changes in instructors, and we have 3 or 4 different instructors teaching the research process, research methods. And so you will find that some teach it better than others, and some students get it better than others. And some students don't always get it the first time they hear it. And sometimes there can be a long time in between research methods, which is the first or second course in many programs, to the actual completion of dissertation. So that's actually a conversation in program development. Where will research methods occur, and how often will we refer to those, to the processes, and what language are our instructors using when they refer to research process and research cycle? That's a good question, though. Absolutely.
The other question isn't exactly to you. It's actually Natalie wants to hear more about that bowl of spaghetti. Perhaps Wendy could find a graphic of that and share it. Olga says that some of our doctoral programs introduce research design and conceptual frameworks after students take the research methods class. So is that the most common structure?
It frequently is the most common structure. Most doctoral programs, especially in areas that have some type of stagnated development. For example, I'll just say, you know, psychology has been a discipline for quite a long time, you know, almost 200 years. And so you will find that programs of psychology immediately begin with a directed readings course. That's one of their first courses. You get a foundations course and a directed readings. And so they're introduced to some foundational readings in the field in that directed readings course. And then, and depending on who's teaching it, they may get a light introduction to conceptual frameworks in that course or not. And then later on, it's reinforced in research design, research methods, etc. I'm arguing or advocating that we need to be more intentional about that introduction and about reinforcing that that is occurring in more than just one course. And I would say that that information literacy piece, if you're not as, your institution has to be really intentional about it to prevent that stagnation in process.
Thank you. Were there any other questions before Vandy
Or
continues?
comments. I love that comment.
Or comments.
That was a good comment.
So Olga also commented, we as librarians should learn about the course sequence and where to embed ourselves.
Absolutely. I think that's key. And finding that place where you have intentional conversations about the research cycle and the research process, and recognizing that with every single professor in a program, getting to know those courses, and even just to know which courses require a final paper, what kind of final paper is so significant. I have a split role in that I direct a library and I direct instructional design. So I look at program development from that perspective. And of course, it has bleed over for me in both areas that I can see, where these conversations need to be emphasized, where more information literacy support is needed in courses.
So Sergio made the comment that he thinks the entrance door is called the literature review.
Whoa, there we go. There's a long
That's
comment.
Wendy's response about the spaghetti bowl.
Well, for my students here, they conduct lit reviews in a couple of different courses. And so then toward the end of the program, the stages of developing their proposal are course-based. It's not independent. So I find frequently that when students get into the proposal course, that they assume that the lit review is the end of the project. They don't realize that it's actually just one chapter in that dissertation step. And so, it's been a process to help them recognize that the lit review is not the completion of the science. It's just the informing of the science.
Thank you. There are no other questions or comments at this time if you wanted to continue on.
Yep, we'll keep going forward.
But please feel free to continue to put them, and Benny will take time to respond to them.
Absolutely. Okay, so SCAMPER. Metacognition is the essential part of the research process. One of the successful methods used in creative thinking is the SCAMPER technique. While there are different creative thinking and problem-solving techniques, SCAMPER is considered one of the easiest and most direct methods. The SCAMPER technique is based very simply on the idea that what is new is a modification of existing old things around us. So that's using schema. SCAMPER provides a toolkit to encourage creative thinking and recognize metacognition in ourselves. SCAMPER was first introduced by Bob Eberle to address targeted questions that help solve problems or ignite creativity during brainstorming meetings. The word SCAMPER is an acronym for 7 techniques: substitute, combine, adapt, modify, put to another use, eliminate, and reverse. During the need for critical thinking, either alone or inside a group, forcing the mind to think in a specific flow can help emerging innovative ideas that won't be possible to reach using a regular thinking flow. And more specifically, a thinking flow that we have always used in the past to develop ideas. The SCAMPER technique aims to provide 7 different thinking approaches to find innovative ideas and solutions. The substitute technique focuses on parts of an idea that can be replaced with another. During this type of thinking, the focus is on making decisions to substitute part of the process or elements with another. The technique tends to provide alternatives to evaluate different solutions. The combined technique allows the student to analyze the possibility of merging 2 ideas, stages of the process, or data in one single, more efficient output. In some cases, combining 2 innovative ideas can lead to a new data set or technology. ADAPT, for the A, ADAPT refers to a brainstorming discussion that aims to adjust or tweak data or process for a better output. This adjustment can range between minor changes to radical changes in the whole project. Adaptation is one of the efficient techniques to solve problems through enhancing the existing process. The M is for modified. The modified technique refers to changing the process in a way that unleashes more innovative capabilities or solves problems. This change is more than just adjustment, as it focuses on the overall process. For example, it can target reducing the project's process or change our perspective of how to look at a problem. The put to another use, this technique concerns how to put the current data or process in another purpose, or how to use the existing data to solve new problems. For example, this technique can be used to learn how to shift an existing data set to another participant or another user type. Eliminate. As the name implies, this technique aims to identify the parts of the process that can be eliminated to improve the process, data, or outcome. It also helps to explore the unnecessary parts of a project. In some situations, the unnecessary resources or steps in the process provide extra load for the project to achieve innovation or creativity. Eliminating these resources extends the ability to innovate and allocate more resources for creativity within the project. Finally, the reverse for R, reverse or rearrange technique aims to explore the innovative potential when changing the order of the process. Reversing the process or part of it can help solve problems or produce more innovative outputs. So SCAMPER has been around quite a while and has been used as a technique in business meetings. And so Bob Eberle, in his work Games for Imagination Development, created a set of questions set within the SCAMPER framework to provide examples of self-questions which, when applied in the thesis and dissertation research process, may aid students in more effective ideation. So let's have a look at the substitute line of the matrix. We can see under thing or idea some questions we could ask to aid in ideation. Can I replace a part or something else? Can I exchange the material for something else? Can I try a different technique? What if I take an existing idea and substitute some element of it? Just as an aside, I realize the box has a typo, but again, this is directly from Bob Eberle's work, so I didn't correct it. I won't read the whole matrix, but if you assume that each column is recognize the thing or idea, process or system, situation or person are frequently elements of our thesis or dissertation study ideas, then we can use this question framework to help us while we're conducting the research process. So where can this most be applied? Again, metacognitive processes can be applied to learning and thinking in all disciplines and contexts. It begins with improvisation or imitation. So I'm going to show you a model of this concept. So for example, in our directed readings courses, we often have students do article critiques. They find a sample study and they review that study and they try to summarize what took place in that study. So during the research cycle, the first thing we ask students to do is to develop an idea or topic. We introduce students to the cycle of research through the examination of published research in the form of article critiques. Students review literature and write about that literature. What students may not realize is that during these activities, they should be looking for ideas to use for their own dissertation or thesis idea. And so if we look at this breakdown of this particular article, we can see that the topic is about coaching behaviors. The participants are identified. There are two sets of participants, the students and the coaches. It's in a high school setting. 2 survey instruments were used, and the conclusion was that that the study identified factors involved in successful coaching, and the study writers indicated that they would like to use this as a feedback schema for measuring coaching behaviors for improvement, an evaluation model. All right, so if our student is looking at this, we can ask during the research process, we can have them apply SCAMPER. So what are some things that I should think about in this study? Would the results be different if there was a different coaching population? Would it be different in a different setting? Would it be different with a different survey instrument? Combine. What if I brought in a third participant group? Would the results change? For example, the parents of student athletes. What if I tried to adapt this study? Instead of evaluating coaching behaviors, how about evaluating their use of teaching standards? What if I modify it? Would changing the timeline of when the surveys were administered affect the results? Put to another use. Instead of using the outcomes for feedback, how about the evaluation of coaching job descriptions? What if I eliminated one of the survey instruments? Would it make the study more authoritative to focus on one survey instrument? And then the reverse. Can I evaluate, can an evaluation of the response to coaching be made of student athlete behaviors? In other words, instead of looking at it as a feedback loop, what does it say about our student population's response? So again, applying the SCAMPER model, using those questions, you're asking the student to think more deeply about what they're reading and what they're summarizing, so that they can be more aware as scientists. So on the previous slide, we offered the summary, and we ask all of these questions. I got a little ahead of my notes. SCAMPER helps the student develop the ideas and the concepts to look for when they get into that research process of what do I look for, what should I be considering. This provides them that schema or that toolkit to support that process. So it's at this point we can demonstrate that metacognition in the research process, the development of the topic, the locating ideas, the applying the creative thinking to envision the science in a new way and visualize their own thinking in the process so that interpretation and evaluation are recognized and known. This is absolutely necessary for the student writer to apply what they have read and identified as relevant to new scientific situations. Metacognitive processes can be applied to thinking and learning in all disciplines. It's an essential skill for lifelong learning, and therefore metacognitive skills need to be taught and discussed with students. SCAMPER provides that framework for the support document that is employed in our student consultations and referred to in information literacy exercises, providing the new schema that has become a part of the student's metacognitive toolkit. So we've been very successful in employing the SCAMPER document provided by Eberly in this new context. And have drastically reduced our ABD student count. We introduced this cognition process in a dissertation workshop for students during the pandemic, and we saw a great deal of progress. So questions?
So Olga says, it's a great idea to apply SCAMPER method to research design. I think my PhD and business students would be open to the idea. I teach topic and research questions development via literature review, a module in our introduction to research courses. And Wendy says, I think this concept would be hugely useful, especially to my doctoral students in educational leadership. So I wanted to ask you, can you talk more about you mentioned in passing that this was first introduced in a workshop. Can you talk a little bit? Can you expand a little bit on the workshop?
Right. So, I came to this institution and program design was fairly developed here. And so our doctoral students don't take the research methods course until near the end of their program. And it's frustrating to me because they take a directed readings course as the first course of the program, and then research methods is near the end of the program. And so they're not making the connection between those two things. And so I asked if I could do a dissertation workshop. And so I did a 3-day intensive workshop where I invited students to, we did it in person the first year, that was in 2019. And then we did it via Zoom after that. And then now we offer it as a continuing ed course on our website. But we started with the research cycle, how this is an intentional process. I got faculty involved, so faculty actually took one of the boxes in the research cycle, and each time they would talk about, okay, developing your idea and concept, then I would pop in with, hey, this is the research cycle, and so we're going to do this. And so every, after, 2.5 days of direct instruction with instructors just going through the cycle, and I'm popping in at the beginning to say this, remember, this is the research cycle, take out your diagram, let's get our questioning model out because you're about to ask questions. It starts to become embedded. And yeah, we're looking at redesigning the order of course acquisition in the programs so we can get research methods closer to directed readings, but also to embedding a module within every course that employs SCAMPER and reminds them that using SCAMPER is appropriate.
Thank you. Sergio had a question. Could you expand on your statement, a great deal of progress that was achieved? How did you measure that?
Well, but in 2019, while I can't disclose numbers, I can say we actually do keep counts, and I'm assuming all programs do, of where students are in their programs, and our chair of doctoral studies keeps account of how many students are ABD, when was the last time they connected with the chair, etc. Where are they in their progress? And so when we noticed that there was that bulk, that bulk of ABD students were targeted with that dissertation and with the SCAMPER model, and then we followed up with a survey of everyone who participated in the workshop and received exposure to the SCAMPER model. And so I can say 100% of those students who participated in the first workshop completed their dissertation within the following year.
Wow.
Right. Wow. What a number, right? Every single one of, so they came into the workshop, all of those students did not have an approved proposal. And so they left the workshop with a proposal design, and they, the chairs and all, if all full-time faculty were involved in the workshop. So they left the workshop with a proposal draft, and then within a year, all of those students had completed their dissertations. And so in the second, and then in the second round of that dissertation workshop, we have so far, of the 12 students that completed, we have 10 who have completed their dissertation.
Those are great numbers.
I mean, I'm ecstatic. I just, I can't say enough that first generation students, they are problem solvers, but they need to first recognize the problem. Mm-hmm. And once they recognize the problem, employing a schema is effective. So the SCAMPER provides that support for developing their schema in the research process.
Okay. So Emily had a question. I can definitely see how SCAMPER would be useful in getting students to choose a research question for their dissertation. Is that its primary use in your mind, or are there other contexts where it could be used?
Oh, this has been used. This is used in MBA programs. It's used in, it was born in marketing. Let me say that. SCAMPER was born in marketing meetings. Bob Everly comes from that field. And so it was used as a brainstorming technique during marketing meetings to develop new concepts or new marketing plans. And then it was adopted, it was recognized by systems thinking gurus as a systems thinking model. And that's how I became exposed to it, because there were a couple of other librarians at I think at Arizona, one at Idaho, that was using it, introducing the idea as a way to develop dissertation questions.
I was looking at the section on people in situations, and I was thinking, oh, you could use that to talk to your dissertation committee.
Right. Right, absolutely. So, and I find that once you have it, it's being applied in other ways. That's just not something that I've evaluated in my program, particularly. I know it's being employed in other ways. I have faculty, just make anecdotal comments about it and how they use it in other situations. But, I haven't made any study of that or made record of that.
Okay. Wendy says this is a very significant success, and she's correct. I'm going to add the graph to the boot camp workshop she does on subject mapping.
Oh, hey, that sounds great.
which seems to make sense. And Emily says, thanks. It's interesting to think of it in non-academic terms. Were there other comments or questions for Vandy?
Well, I think that's an interesting comment from Emily. Non-academic terms. I'm at the Sports Academy, and so our most prevalent program here is sports management. And we're a SACS accredited school, of course, but our sports management program is the only sports management program in the country accredited by a business accreditor, ACPSB. And so our program employs business management terms to support that accreditation and perspective within our program design. So yeah, just a comment on that. Yeah, since it's a model that comes out of a particular area of business. Yeah. I just want to say thank you all. I enjoy talking about this. I would love to hear if you use the Scamper Eberle's questioning framework in some of your interactions. I'd love to hear about that. And I absolutely say, please take my ideas and use them as you will, and make your experience for your graduate students better in your programs and in your libraries. I really enjoyed doing this. And I hope some of you will also present webinars, because I think we learn so much more when we have these conversations.
So I do want to say that Olga says that she was part of the Hopscotch research design team, and she puts a link in the chat, and she will see about how she can apply Scamper there.
Oh, hey, I like that. Looking at your website now, I can't wait to check that out.
And it's pretty simple. I'm going to ask this question because to get this, find Scamper online, to find Dr. Eberle's, Professor Eberle's, Mr. Eberle's work on it. Is that relatively easy to find online? Are you
Absolutely.
right now? Okay, great.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. His work comes up as the first choice.
Scamper. Okay, great.
Right. You can see there's an explanation of it on mindtools.com. He has a book, which is Scamper, Creative Games and Activities for Imagination, which is available on Amazon. There's an explanation of this on toolshero.com.
Okay.
The Scamper technique was developed by Bob Eberle during the 1970s. So there are numerous writings about this, and you'll find it in business manuals and other places. There's a myriad of sources across the internet, especially when you're talking about design thinking, systems thinking, etc. Yeah.
Thank you. I noticed that some people are leaving. Before you leave, would you please put in the chat where you heard about today's meeting? Because we send it out rather late. We'd like to know where our marketing is hitting and what people are looking at, so we continue to market, because this is the first in a series of events, and we'd like to make sure that we get that information out to everybody. So Rachel said she works with community college students who are at the very, very early stages of research. But she wanted to attend because she was sure she could learn something, and she did. So thanks so much. And also Rosa says she's a new librarian, so this is very helpful. Actually, as a new librarian, boy, if I had learned this as a new librarian, that would have been great.
Anything, I think sometimes, especially with the models, I think sometimes we draw models and we absorb something from it, and we think everybody absorbs the same thing, and they just don't. That was a humbling experience for me early in my career as a librarian.
Donna says that this is very helpful. She is in the process of planning to design a research methods course in collaboration with a disciplinary faculty member. So this would be great from the very beginning. And the high school librarian, Becca, she says she's working on developing a research seminar for high school students, and I'm excited to incorporate this into her course.
That's awesome.
And Rachel was saying, yes, I feel this is applicable to more than just dissertation students.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And as Wendy said, this will be recorded. So Scott, you will be able to actually pass on the recording to your colleague who's creating a research class for grad students. And thank you to everyone who took the time to tell us where you learned about this.
So as I develop other products or processes for this, I will be sharing it online. And and all of this work on this area is publicly available through a Google search. So thank you so much, everyone. I really appreciated having you attend my webinar, and I hope you will attend more of the webinars that will be in this series. I'm looking forward to seeing those. Won't be by me, but I can't wait to see who presents. Thank you so much.
Oh, I spelled that wrong.